Up to this point, we have talked through fixed assets, which are tangible in nature, which means we can hold them or touch them or see them. And to expense them, we depreciate them by debiting depreciation expense and crediting accumulated depreciation using those three methods that we've spoken about previously: straight line, units of activity, and double declining balance. Now we're going to talk about intangible assets. These assets have no physical substance. Typically, and most often, we cannot touch them. They can be in paper, but the asset themselves is not like a piece of machinery. Examples of those are patents. One of the problems we currently have with China is that we give them our design on behalf of our company. They manufacture it, they make a copy for themselves, and they go out the back door and remanufacture it cheaper and with a different name. In fact, I was at a store the other day, and I'm sure most of you have heard of the shoe company called Tom's, and you may even have a pair. Well, the shoe that I saw was Bob's. Looked very similar to the Tom's shoes, and I'm sure the Tom's litigation staff is looking into the Bob's company, or that company that makes Bob's. Another example of that is a trademark. Many of you have seen those, the Apple on your iPad or iPod or Apple computer, the Coke, the Nike Swish. Those are all trademarks. Typically, when you see that, you'll see a TM and you'll see a circle around it. Frosties for Wendy's is trademarked. So you can't go to Carl's Jr.'s and get a Frosty because that has been trademarked for Wendy's only. Then you also have copyrights. That means when you go to Kinko's and they say, is that copyrighted? You're not supposed to be copying it. Most of us who have copied music over time, that's not supposed to be copyrighted. That is copyrighted and not supposed to be copied. We also have franchise fees, which McDonald's, you could in fact own a McDonald's and you've bought the franchise from the McDonald's Corporation. And then we have goodwill, which we'll discuss here in a minute. Recording goodwill. Goodwill is created when one company buys another company and pays more than the value of the net assets. So let's take a look at this company. This company sold for $8 million. However, the value of the company, in fact, what all their assets add up to, is only $6 million. So how would we record this? Well, if you come over here, we would debit net assets of the seller company for $6 million. We also are going to credit cash for $8 million. So we're paying cash for $8 million. We're getting $6 million's worth of stuff, is how I like to look at it. $6 million worth of stuff. It could be inventory. It could be fixed assets, equipments. It could be a building. It could even be land. It's stuff. Okay? Stuff. The difference between the $6 million of stuff we can account for and the $8 million we paid, we call that goodwill. Or many people would say we would call it a plug, but goodwill means that we are willing to pay a premium for the company because of the customers the company has, its reputation, its employees, maybe you want the CEO, its market share, its research you're buying. It can even be the best corner in the city, location. So goodwill is an amount of money, which is the difference from stuff and the price you're paying, for something that is not tangible. We can call it blue sky. We can call it goodwill. But it's for something that we feel is important and is inherited in this company in nature, like employees, market share, and reputation. Goodwill is never expensed, which means it stays on your books forever. We do not expense it over time. It just sits there. When we amortize intangible assets, it's called amortizing. When we do the same thing to fixed assets, it's called depreciation. But when we do it to intangible assets, we call it amortizing over time. Typically, amortization is done using the straight line. So in this particular case, we have $60,000 patent that has the maximum legal life of 20 years. The company believes that the patent will be useful only for 12 years and then be worthless. So we're going to divide the 60,000 by 12 and we will amortize 5,000 per year. We do that by debiting amortization for 5,000 and crediting patent. Remember, amortization only applies to intangibles with limited lives like patents. Assets with indefinite lives, such as trademarks and goodwill, are instead examined periodically to check for impairment. So we do not amortize a trademark and we do not amortize goodwill. No, no. It is limited to patents and copyrights. Copyrights are valid 70 years after the death of the person death of the person who wrote it. "70 years after the death." So therefore, typically, we do not amortize copyrights as well. So that means your whole life you get to benefit from having the copyrights, and then your estate and heirs after that up to 70 years after your death. It's amazing thinking about copyrights live forever. Now what I'd like to do is just quickly review. So far we've gone over fixed assets, and we expense those through depreciation. We then talked about intangible assets, and we amortize those. And mostly that would be patents and possibly other intangible assets. However, patents are the ones that are mostly amortized. In addition to that, the book does not talk about natural resources. When we talk about natural resources, so for fixed assets we depreciate, for intangible assets we amortize. For natural resources, such as oil and gas, mining, we deplete. We actually have depletion expense and accumulated depletion. The way that we typically do this is using the units of activity method. What I wanted you to understand is that we have one thing that they did leave out here in the book, and that is natural resources. And we use depletion for that. Acts just like depreciation, but in fact it's depletion, because once we take it out of the earth, we'll never be giving it back. I hope this was beneficial, and I'm anxious to see how you do on the homework.